Chris Cuomo here. Welcome to NewsNation. This is where right and left come to try to be reasonable. Look, crime pays in politics, okay? And I don't just mean when politicians commit crimes and get away with it, which we've seen, but as an issue, being tough on crime is a trope in politics, and it works. And that is why our president is playing with troops. And new reports say Pentagon is creating plans to send more troops into another city, Chicago, as soon as next month. D.C., Chicago. Are these coincidences? No, this is about politics, but this is a good political play for the president because Trump is making a bet that when it comes to crime, doing more looks better and plays to the reality that perception beats reality when it comes to politics, especially on crime. He is making a good bet. I'm not saying it's a good policy. I do not believe putting the National Guard in places around the city is going to have any long-lasting impact on crime for several reasons, which I'll get to. But here's why he's making a good bet, okay? The perception is, recent polls, 64% of us said there is more crime today than there was a year ago. The reality? Crime is down nationwide. Crime has been going down nationwide since the pandemic in nearly every category. But that doesn't feel true, does it? Well, because that's the difference between perception and reality, especially when you look at crime through a curated lens. What do I mean? Cherry-picked cases to show the crime that you want people to see, like migrants or mentally ill homeless people. And it matters that the victims of these crimes are often not the poor or those who live in high crime areas. See, so there's a boogeyman effect here. This is about scaring people who don't know the reality as well every day. But those who fear those people and places. That means for that population, the military sounds like a great fix. They don't live there. But at some point, we have to deal with reality. And I do not believe that putting military in places short term, especially when they're untrained in policing, is going to really reduce crime. And you may have reaction formation when they leave. Now, why is this looking good for Trump? Well, look at what happened in Chicago this weekend. You had a half dozen gang members shoot each other. You had dozens hurt. And the right likes to point to Chicago as proof that Democrats suck on crime and their cities are crime-ridden. And I got to tell you, the governor of Illinois, who is, I believe he has some real political talents, Pritzker, but he's not helping the situation when he seems to be fighting the reality in Chicago. Don't come here, we're fine. You're not there. You're not fine. Chicago is a very dangerous place, especially for young, poor males. Okay? Now, what's also true, because this is perception and reality, homicides in Chicago are down 33% this year. Okay? So there is progress, but that doesn't mean there still isn't too much crime there. And probably in most big cities. Okay? And that's the trap. When you push back on Trump's apparent desire to help fight crime, right? You know, when he says, hey, I want to give you troops, I'll give you troops. And you're like, oh, keep the name of my city out of your mouth or leave Chicago alone. It sounds like you want to defend the status quo, that you don't care about crime and fighting crime as much as you do fighting Trump. Because the mistake is fighting the what? Fighting on the basis of crime instead of the how. What are the policies? What's better than troops? I can think of a lot of things, but they're not as politically saleable. They're not as easy. They're not as good an image. They don't work as well on social media, and they take time and they're expensive. But they work, and the reason that crime is going down anywhere that it is because of what I'm talking about, not troops, okay? But the Democrats have misplayed this before. Defund the police, non-prosecution policies, bail for everyone. None of these play well politically, even though I could make arguments for why they were improvements if they had been applied the right way and not overcorrected. But we're past all that. The left has made some poor plays around crime. However, I do not agree that Democrats cultivate crime. So what do you hit me with? Well, then why do cities led by Democrats tend to have crime issues? Well, there are two alternatives, right? One is Democrats create crime. The other one is they happen to lead in the places where the most people live, and population centers tend to have more crime. Now, I don't know why Democrats would want to fight the crime fight when they do represent the high population areas, which means they're going to have more crime. But let's look at it a different way. If you want to play, I don't like this game of right versus left. I like bringing down crime. I'm okay with the president making crime an issue. It's very rare to see it on the federal level, to be honest, because the states do most of the crime fighting. I wish our feds would actually start with taking over the counting of crimes all over the country, because we don't do a great job with it. Don't just look at cities. Look at states. When you look at states, and not just big cities, you will see crime problems in red and blue when you look at it per capita. So the darker the color, the more crime there is, okay? So as you see, the lighter colors are less crime. Per capita, you start getting into a lot of red areas. So this really isn't about Democrat or Republican. The only real policy, a major policy that distinguishes the two parties, has been the death penalty. And I'm telling you, you can feel any way you want about it. And I don't believe it lowers crime. I don't believe there's any data that shows that in places where they have the death penalty, that homicides go down more than other places. In fact, it's often less. Why? Because it's not that simple, okay? And you look at those red states that have their own crime problems, and you know a number of them are offering to send military to D.C. Why? Because they're playing with perception versus reality. They have crime problems, several of those states, that they should be addressing at home. Maybe they should send the National Guard into their own cities. Why don't you do that? You have real crime problems. Tennessee, you have real crime problems. South Carolina, deal with them. Send in the National Guard on your own people. So, violent crime corresponds to population. But what's the real indicator of where you're going to find crime? Poverty. Now, I'm not saying that poor people are bad. I'm saying that poverty can create desperation. Poverty can constrict your ability to improve, to find avenues of opportunity, avenues to dignity. And poverty can create a culture where all you see around you are people who have failed to get out of that cycle of poverty. Poverty is a clue to crime. And when you look at it through that lens, perception falls away to the reality. It is not about blue or red. It is about green. Money matters, or the lack thereof. And again, I was raised by a man who was a depression baby and was broke-ass broke, okay? I'm not saying that poor people don't have morals, don't have values. My father was one of the most righteous men I've ever met in my life, if not the most. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying poverty matters more than party, okay? And when you look at it that way, through poverty, you look at rural areas versus urban areas now, and you know what you will see? If you adjust for poverty per capita, rural areas often surpass urban areas when it comes to certain types of crime. Not homicides, not heavy violence, but burglaries, which can be violent, and property theft are often higher in rural areas. So does that mean red people like to, red states? Red people, God, what's happening to us? Red states like to steal cars? No, it's poverty and how it affects those populations. So the president has made a good bet, and he's making a good play. And there is something valuable in doing this. Is he doing it the right way? Now that's the conversation to have, and no one's having it. Why? It's too much. It's too tedious. It's easier to just say that this makes him a despot. Or it's easier to say, if you don't want the military sent in, then you like crime. That's easier, and we're cheap and easy. But not here. Is sending troops a real solution or more of a stunt? Where is crime high and why and what makes it go down. Now, the president wants it to be simple, and look, I get it, but that's not the way it is. He wants it to be that troops equal peace, and he made that case to you about Washington, D.C.
In the last 11 days, we've had no murders, and that's the first time that's taken place in years, actually years. We always have a murder a week. They call it a murder a week. You come here from Iowa, you come here from Indiana, you come here from Idaho, because you're so proud of your country, you love your country, and then you get murdered. Your son gets murdered, your daughter gets murdered, you get murdered. See the media, you get murdered.
Look, he's not wrong to say that he cares about this. Don't attack that. Deal with whether this is the best idea. Now, first of all, this is not the first time, not even this year, that Washington, D.C. has gone a long stretch without reporting a homicide. In March, they went 2 weeks, okay? Now, is there too much crime in D.C.? Of course. Is it trending the right way? Yeah, depending on whether or not, as the president says, you're one of the families that's affected by it. But if you care about crime as more than a distraction from tariffs and ICE raids and wars that won't end, then let's talk about what really works. Why is crime down since COVID? And it is. Depends on who you ask, right? Everybody's got a different version of it. But it's not because of putting military places. It's not even because of more cops, okay? Crime is down, and there are actually fewer cops on the streets today than there were before the pandemic. Did you know that? The answer isn't just about more police. It's about better policing. It's about using analytics. It's about using AI. It's about understanding how to clear cases, okay? And it's about looking at where the crime is and figuring out what those communities need, especially their youth. In Chicago and nationwide, fewer cops, but more investment. And by the way, not to defend them, because man, did they screw it up with those 3 words, but this is what people meant, some who were acting in good faith, when they said defund the police. It wasn't get rid of police. It was think about how you make investments in communities, and that it shouldn't be just boots on the ground. A 90% increase in construction of community neighborhood centers, a 20% increase in highway construction spending. Now, these programs aren't necessarily violence reduction, but they have an effect on building communities, allowing places for kids to go, right, to create jobs, okay? And that leads to crime coming down. It's not red or blue, it's green. And in high crime cities specifically, the reduction in violent crime can be credited to both investing in communities and better use of police. Chicago, for example, they're focusing on not just hiring more cops, but having cops police better. What does that mean? How to be more efficient with the clearance rates of crimes. Okay, what does that mean? Seeing cases through that you can solve. The police are crediting their 30% reduction in homicides to their new crime gun intelligence center. What is that? It is increasing their ability to find and arrest murderers using AI, using different analytics. Smart policing. Good for them. Do they have to do more? Of course. I respect our cops deeply and know their value, and they need the help. The reality is it takes a lot more than just sending in the National Guard to make a difference on crime. But if you want to play to perception, crime is the place to do it. And you'll do it exactly the way the president is right now. What is the counter? The counter is to have better ideas to reduce crime. Not to say him fighting crime is wrong. Now, extending to Chicago is just extending this play. And I'm telling you, you go after Trump for wanting to fight crime in cities, you're going to lose with the majority. You go after having better ideas and prove why Chicago is not what he thinks it is, or D.C., now you're in a place where you can be a real challenge. So let's talk about this. I want to bring in 2 people who know the issues and the realities way better than I do. Okay? Former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich and former Democratic Ohio State Senator, who also studies a lot of these on a highly academic and political level, Nina Turner. It's good to have you both. First of all, do either of you absolutely hate anything I said up till this point?
Your opening monologue was beautiful. Yeah, I love your
Did you say
open
it was
monologue.
terrible, or was it? I'm just looking to pass, Professor. I'm just looking to pass.
No, you hit the nail on the head. Everything you said,
All
I
right.
was just cheering you on. Yeah, absolutely.
So, Governor, I went back and looked. You used to talk this talk when you were in office about how you're not going to arrest your way out of crime. You're not going to punish your way out of crime. You got to punish crimes, but you got to give people opportunities. Doesn't that have to be part of this conversation? And again, I'm not faulting the president for wanting to take on crime. I think it's a no-lose political issue. But how you take it on matters. Governor.
No, I think what you said in your opening monologue is very profound and correct. It's a comprehensive problem. It requires comprehensive answers to complicated issues. And things like community programs and constructing places where kids can go and stay off the streets, all of that's valid and necessary. But in the short term, in the immediate term, notwithstanding the fact that some of the statistics are saying that homicides may be down in Chicago, we've had 254 murders in Chicago in 233 days. And the fact of the matter is you can get up every morning in this city and you can say somebody's going to get murdered. And the reality is 80% of the people that are going to be murdered are black people, because that's where most of the violent crime is happening. And in neighborhoods where I live or where Governor Pritzker lives, most of it doesn't happen there. But I would tell you this, if Governor Pritzker had the problem in his neighborhood that's facing the black community in Chicago, he'd be the first one asking Trump not only for the National Guard, he'd ask for the Army, the Navy, the Marines, and the Air Force. Because it is unconscionable that you can look the other way and allow this to happen every single day. And it's not something that's new. When I was governor back in 2008, this was happening in Chicago as well. I was a Democratic governor. I felt a moral obligation to do something to help because this was a city problem and the mayor was responsible. I offered help. I even suggested more state police to help Mayor Daley. I even suggested, if you'd like, I'll send you the National Guard. And instead of them even welcoming any kind of help, they rebuffed me, and I was mocked and compared to John Wayne in a newspaper article that made me look stupid. No, I think this will stop murders that are happening now and make our neighborhoods safer, particularly the black neighborhoods and the brown neighborhoods. And in the long term, do the things you're talking about. Absolutely, that would be the way to go.
But we don't hear anything about the other piece, Nina. And yeah, sure, you roll some Humvees up on any neighborhood anywhere, it's going to be more quiet unless people are looking to go out and get killed, because you're messing with the wrong people there. But the reason that the places in Chicago, he called it the killing fields. There were killing fields in Cabrini Green. Not anymore, because they took down the buildings. I stood there with Brother Bill and talked about how the Gangster Disciples and the Keystone Cobras and everybody else had to get through with it. And it happened there because there were poor people there. And if you don't have poor people, then you don't have the same kind of criminal situations because you have opportunity and you have programs and you have infrastructure. So what's the Democrat play here? Because I think you lose if you say, no, Trump, don't do anything. Leave us alone.
That was what was so beautiful about your monologue, your opening monologue, Chris. You touched on all of the buttons. You cannot deny that even if crime is down, violent crime is down, if you are the victim of that or somebody in your family, then it's not down low enough. One of the things that the president could have done is to try to work with locally elected leaders. I served on the Cleveland City Council. I served for a mayor, Mayor Michael R. White, who did not play that in his city. And what the president has done is he's making local leaders the enemy of the state, whereas he could do this a different way. It doesn't have to be done this way. And Chris, your point about this is all temporary. Having those Humvees and the National Guard in there does not solve on the other side of the equation, which is to help provide long-standing opportunities for these communities. You are absolutely correct. Poverty is poverty over party. And when you have people who have more robustness in their lives, more opportunities in their lives, then you will see crime start to tick down. So it's not an either or, it is a both and.
Nina, I love you and thank you. Governor Blagojevich, always appreciate your perspective. And I love having you on, too. I'll give you a little love. I'm not going to say, I've known Nina longer, Gov, but it's not a personal thing. Take care. Thank you both. Let's keep talking about this. Look, hopefully it stays a real issue so we can talk about actually doing real mid and long-term things to make it better. But I'll tell you what, if the Democrat posture is to fight the political reality of this, you're going to lose. Fighting crime is the right move. How you fight it, focus on that. 4 minutes, 35 seconds. Ukraine and Russia. Is there going to be peace in any kind of time frame that makes sense between now and the midterms? Because it would be a big deal, okay? You think there will be a meeting between the two presidents in Ukraine and Russia? I mean, there should be. There should have been one already, right? The two countries continue to attack. This is what Putin does. He intensifies it every time there's a peace meeting. What does that tell you? Just yesterday, though, Ukraine is now doing its dirtiest because this is war. And they launched a drone strike on a nuclear Russian facility. I want to speak to someone who's uniquely qualified to discuss the role of all three. And let's be real. What is keeping peace from happening? What has to change? Paul Manafort worked in that part of the world, understands the mentality and the politics. Next. The violence is ramping up in the war in Ukraine because that's what Russia does, and Ukraine is now retaliating as much as it can, especially because of drones. So, here's my question. Can America force peace in this situation? I got to tell you, I think the answer to that question is no. And I respect this president and the last president trying to do it. I think it is a unique American prospect that we try to do this. I think it shows what our place is here. But maybe we're also kidding ourselves. So I want to bring in someone who understands this, and this is absolutely who I would call to understand it. So I'm just letting you in on a phone call I would have made anyway. Understands all the players as well as the dynamic. Paul Manafort. Now, most of you know him as Trump's former campaign manager, but I've known him most of my life, and he understands international, specifically around Ukraine, the dynamic with Russia, and what America can do and can't. So, Paul, thank you for coming on to offer us your perspective.
Good to be with you again, Chris.
So, Paul, I don't think that we're a Trump away from making peace in this, that Putin is a trickier guy, and America doesn't have enough leverage to make this stop unilaterally. Do I have it right or wrong?
Chris, normally you think things close to right. This time, I don't think you do. I mean,
okay.
I understand what you're saying, but you got to look beyond the headlines and see what's really happening. I mean, Trump has already changed the dynamic in this war. Just think of the concessions that have already been established. By Putin, even though he hasn't acknowledged them as concessions. But he's basically said that the territorial integrity of Ukraine is going to be is sacrosanct. Now, that doesn't mean the borders, but the territorial integrity. Putin's also given up on the fact that he can impose his own puppet as president of Ukraine and have a say in that selection process. And he's also acknowledged that as far as the war is concerned, that he's going to have to accept security guarantees from the West. He's accepted that in the meeting he had in Alaska with Trump. Now, are these hard and fast concessions? No, because we're in a process right now. But Trump has already moved the ball. And so now the issue we're talking about in this is land swaps. And everybody knows there are going to be land swaps. The question is what land. And it's not a matter of fairness anymore. It's just the reality on the ground. The Europeans understand it. Zelenskyy understands it. Of course, he has to say he's not going to accept land swaps. Of course not. And he should say that. But as we get to the table, that's when the dynamic will start to change. And Trump understands this. You can't bring the war to an end by increasing the military attacks. Now, what's going on right now with last-minute attacks by Russia and the drone attacks by Ukraine? That's part of an end game, in my judgment, not the middle of a war. You asked something just before you went to break. You said, "Will there be a peace, before the midterm elections?" Frankly, I think there will be, and I think there will be maybe even this year, because Trump is committed to this, and he's using his presidency as a bully pulpit. He hasn't shied away from the tough spot,
I did. Listen, I totally agree with you. I actually think that you're putting too much pressure on Trump. I'm not saying that he hasn't been trying. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I'm actually surprised by how much he's been trying, because I think it's so low percentage for him. I think it's the right thing for an American president to do. But I don't believe that Putin has made any of those concessions, because he breaks his promise all the time. And I don't think you can point me to one deal he's ever made where he kept his word.
Well, look, do I trust Putin? No. Is the war going to end by the way Biden was prosecuting it? No. Trump is taking a different approach. He said, look, this has got to, the killing has to stop. I mean, people dismiss the significance of Trump saying that. It bothers him immensely. The killing, especially the carnage of children, really bothers Trump. And he feels an obligation to do everything he can as president to bring it to an end, because he knows the Europeans can't end it. He knows Zelenskyy can't end it. And so he's willing to risk his presidency to try and bring that war to an end. And frankly, if you look at all of the other conflicts around the world in the last 6 months that he has solved the problem on, there's a track record there that would give you confidence in Trump's ability if he could get people to the table. We're closer to getting them to the table than we've been in 3 years. It's not there yet. You can't trust Putin, but you can't let the fact that Putin isn't trustworthy be the barrier to trying to force an end to the war. And that's what you're seeing here right now. And the Europeans I think, finally are starting to get this. I mean, what they came to Washington last week and surrounded Trump with their support for what he's doing, that was sending a signal to Putin that Trump is bringing the Europeans behind what he's trying to do. That's a big deal. It's gotten very little coverage, but that's a big deal. Zelenskyy now recognizes that he's going to have to work with Trump to get peace. He's not going to force Trump into expanding the war. Trump has made that clear. And so now the parties are sitting there on one side, and they're coming up with a plan. The Europeans never said that Ukraine should be a part of NATO. I was involved in those discussions. They said Ukraine should be a part of the European Union and of the trade agreement, but they never said that. When Biden made the statement that Ukraine should be part of NATO, Putin went crazy, and it was one of the causes for the war beginning again. And that was a big mistake.
Well, it didn't begin. It didn't begin again. I mean, it was going on. Look, I'm not questioning that Biden's administration didn't get it done. I was there twice during it. I get it. What I'm saying is that it's still going on. They're still dying all over the place, as you know this. And I'm not blaming Trump. I mean, that's the only thing, is I just don't know that there is the leverage, unless everybody gangs up and squeezes Putin's ability to make money for that economy. I don't know why he would do anything.
Well, you've put your finger on one of the tools that Trump will have if this phase of the negotiations doesn't begin to move towards a peace table, because Trump has said his patience is gone. Trump has said he will ratchet up real economic sanctions, not sanctions that let the gas flow through different corridors so that Russia's still getting money, not letting the Gazprom bank finance the trade deals. I mean, the oil and gas deals. Trump will put a real squeeze on the economy, and Putin knows that. So I think we're at the end of this phase of the game. I think what you've seen with Putin and the retaliation by Zelenskyy, it's tactical, not strategic, and I think you're going to find that Trump is going to continue to put his presidency on the line. And he's done something that's really important in this presidency. Some might say he's oversaturated the use of it, but he's used the bully pulpit. He talks to the American people every single day. He lets them know what he's doing. He lets them understand why he's doing it. And he ties them in where relevant to his campaign promises. Because people are tired of having candidates run for office and then forgetting what they promised. All of that is giving him the power and authority to put the pressure on Putin, and I don't think you're going to see Trump back off. But Trump, if you want to understand what he's doing, read his book. Trump, doesn't believe you smack someone in the face when you're trying to get him to a table, unless you're at the last minute and there's been violations of the principles. We're not at that point. Putin met with Trump. Nobody else could bring Putin to the table. Now the question is going to be, how does we move to the next phase? And if Putin backs off, if Putin doesn't follow up on the things that we've talked about in this conversation, I think you'll see Trump pick a big stick. And I think Putin understands that. He's in a position now, and this is a KGB guy, he's in a position where he can make the case he's not capitulating to anybody, and he can go to a table. Trump isn't going to try and embarrass Putin walking to the table. He wants a peace, and he knows you can't take a KGB agent and destroy his ego and expect him to then make concessions. It's pretty logical if you think about it. But listen, you're not reading about these things.
I get it. I'm just saying that, sending the National Guard around to fight crime is the kind of move that I think bears fruit for Trump politically. Trying to end the war in Ukraine with this crazy-ass despot Putin is a very low percentage thing, and I think it's impressive on one level that he's doing it. I appreciate your perspective. We'll keep talking about it as more develops because you know better than I do. And I hope it works out because, we need more peace in this world. But Paul Manafort, thank you for your take. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. Bye now.
All right, brother. Be well. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. So, Erik and Lyle Menendez both got denied parole. Here's the question. Is it because they are a victim of their celebrity? Or is this a case where nobody would have gotten parole? What do you think? I think that everybody said they got there because of the Netflix series. I also think they got denied because of the Netflix series. Now, I'm not saying they should get out. I'm saying that's why they didn't get out. Let's talk to a true insider. Their lawyer, Mark Geragos, his first primetime interview. Next. Erik and Lyle Menendez were both denied parole. Now, there is leaked audio of Erik Menendez and what went on in his parole board hearing, which is a very good window into the reality that I teed up before the break, which is why I think this didn't happen. I think that their infamy is part of this. Now, let me bring in their attorney, Mark Geragos. This is the first time counsel has discussed these decisions in prime time since then. Thank you for doing it, Counselor. Always a pleasure. Why do you believe parole was denied, and do you think it would have been the same if they were not the Menendez?
No, if they were not the Menendez, they would have been given a release date. They did get, and I'm told that they got the least possible, which is a 3-year date. 1 year you can apply to come back. But you'll hear if you play some of the leaked tapes, one of the ironies of this is for Lyle, they called him, his parole commissioner, called him a model inmate, but said he broke the rules with cell phones. And then for Erik, they were focused on all of the stuff that happened more than 10 years ago, as opposed to what he's done in the last 10 years. The irony is you're about to play clips that were leaked, and they have now, because I confronted them with it, the California Department of Corrections has admitted erroneously they broke the rules, and they broke the rules while holding in the brothers for supposedly breaking the rules. So it's rich. It was, I've said it elsewhere, it was rigged, and I'm going to go to the governor and I'm going to go to a Superior Court judge to try to get it reversed.
Well, the governor could have done this a long time ago if he wanted to. Let's play the first piece of sound from Erik's, the leaked piece of audio.
Who first acted in terms of the violence?
Lyle came to the top of the stairs after my dad had ordered me to my room and said he was coming up, and said, "It's happening now." But my focus was, Dad's coming to my room. I can't let Dad come to my room. And Lyle said, "You understand, it's happening now." And I knew what that meant. And we were about to die now. Fear was driving me to that den, and rage. Dad was going to come to my room and rape me that night. And I got the gun at my room, and I went down to the car, and I loaded it, and I ran into that den before Lyle could. I didn't even wait for Lyle. I knew I had to get to that den.
Look, obviously, people are going to be fascinated by this, Mark, because there's a real interest in the narrative. But 35 years later, is this typical in a parole board meeting that you have to go back through the events of that night?
Yes, in one sense you do, because you have to have the insight. What was completely off the charts about that hearing is that the gentleman who was conducting it, Mr. Barton, is the same gentleman who previously gave parole and found that Sirhan was suitable. The idea that you could find Sirhan suitable, who for 25 years has denied that he had anything to do with the crime, and say he's got insight, and then come to Erik and say he's unsuitable, just shows you that the die was cast as soon as they walked in the door.
Now, obviously, the big what should we call it? The big dividing line on this with people who have no sympathy for them was always about the mother. And there's a piece of sound that goes to that from Erik's hearing. Let's listen to it.
My mother had shown that she was united with my dad, but I still didn't believe she knew. And when I found out that she knew, I no longer saw him and her as different. They were different. She was his victim. I should have known that. I should have separated it in my mind. But at that night, I saw them as one person.
You had to go out and reload to kill her.
Yes. All I heard was a no, and I ran out. That's the part of this that is the hardest. I wish to God I did not do that.
Did you, when you heard that
let me
line of
make a
questioning,
couple of comments. Let me
go
make
ahead.
a couple of comments. Do you know the only way that anybody knows that fact is because Lyle in trial number 1 testified to that. There was nobody there. There wasn't any video. That's how they know that. It's been talked about. It is kind of the go-to line for everybody when they want to talk about the trial or what happened. Number 2, at that same trial where Lyle and Erik testified, guess what? Not one, but 2 juries split evenly and voted not guilty on the murder, guilty of manslaughter. This was not a self-defense case. This is what's called imperfect self-defense. At least be honest. One of my big problems with Nathan Hochman, who is the DA in LA County, he's way too smart for this. He's playing to the cheap seats when he says they were going for self-defense. They never went for self-defense. It was imperfect self-defense. They weren't trying to justify what they did. They were mitigating from murder to manslaughter. And by the way, the jurors who heard it agreed that it was a manslaughter, fully half of them. That's the first point. Second point is, for everybody who's going to sit there and say, how could you possibly let them out? How could you possibly say this? How could you ever do Kitty? I will tell you one thing. It's easy to say that. However, you do realize that Kitty's older sister, Joan, has assiduously worked for their release. She was not only the older sister, she characterizes herself as a matriarchal figure, a matriarch to them. And Jose's older sister has uniformly said for their release. And part of the reason that I'm so angry at the parole board is they leaked this tape right before the family was set to testify for Lyle, where a number of the family members said, hey, you have traumatized us, re-traumatized us. You threw autopsy photos up unannounced during the resentencing. You walled us off from victim services. And then you do this. You tell us we can't have any support people here to listen to this proceeding or when we testify. And you're going to leak the tape so it goes viral before we testify. It's outrageous, frankly.
Counselor Geragos, thank you very much, and to be continued.
Thank you.
All right. Appreciate you doing it with us. We'll be right back. Stop fighting for the wrong people when it comes to the immigration debate. Most of the people who enter this country the wrong way do the right thing once they get here. Focus on them. Don't make a gangbanger your face of change and go visit him in another country. Don't make the truck driver who killed people and fled your demand for leniency. 3 million people signing a petition for leniency for him. Why not focus on the people working, raising kids, paying taxes, running small businesses? They are the majority. They make communities. Focus on them. We'll be right back. All right, Leland and I are here now. You know, it's interesting. My phone is lighting up with people saying, I can't believe you're saying that Trump is right to want to help and fight crime. What's wrong about wanting to fight crime? Focus on how he's doing it. You know, you got to focus on the right things, boy, because perception is reality in politics. And being tough on crime, when does that lose?
Well, and you just said the key words, right versus wrong, not left versus right. And as a politician, being on the side against the guy who wants to fight crime, not a very popular place to be.
No, Pritzker should have said, look, Pritzker's got good political skills, okay, governor of Illinois. And he should have said, hey, don't just come in here. Work with me. This is what I need. I can tell you what we need in Chicago, Mr. President.
I'll give you one more.
Humvee away.
Yeah, I'll give you one more. What he should have done is he should have pulled out his phone and called the White House and said, I want to talk to the president. And then he should have showed up at the White House and said, I want to talk to the president. I want help solving this. It would have put it on Trump. But he wanted to have a press conference, not actually solve the problem. Chris, great to see you as always.